just a little fun. So welcome to the finals countdown. This is our finals prep workshop. And before we begin, again, for those of you that are joining us, please make sure you sign in at the tiny URL listed there. It's also in the chat. This is our opportunity to just check who's here and make sure we can follow up with you with a post-workshop survey. All right, so let's talk about some myths about studying and test prep before we even get into the rest of it. The first thing to consider is the fact that more studying does not equal higher grades. And so what that means is that you can study all you want. You can study for hours and hours and hours, but if your studying isn't productive, if your studying isn't really producing results and increasing the amount you're learning, it's not really going to be helping you. And so what's more important is high quality studying. So we're going to talk about how you can do that. There's also the myth that cramming works. Now, a lot of people might say, I do better under pressure. I remember more when I cram. Now, that might just be that you're actually doing a lot of studying before the test, but in the long term, cramming isn't going to help you retain a lot of that information. It's just going to sit there temporarily. It won't move from short-term memory to long-term memory, and so there's danger in that, especially if it's information that you're going to need to know for future classes, for your career. And so, well, yes, cramming may work temporarily. It does put a level of stress on you, the test taker, and it's not great for your long-term retention of the material. Another myth is that computer notes are better. Yes, technology is helping us do so much more and record more information, and it's very easy to take your notes on your computer. But there's a lot of research that shows when you do the tactile movements of taking notes by hand, writing them physically down, you actually retain the information better. And so what I would suggest is to do both. If you want to take your notes by computer, that's great, but then copy them down by hand as well. And that's using two different methods of note-taking, working with the material in multiple ways, and that could help retain that information even better. Study one thing at a time. A lot of people think, okay, I'm going to study one subject for hours, and that's going to be my study time, and then I'm going to study this tomorrow, and then I'm going to study this the next day, where you actually have a better chance of retaining information if you switch between subjects and you do shorter study breaks, and we're going to talk more about that later in the workshop. Who needs sleep? A lot of people figure they'll sleep when they're dead, but you will do better on your test if you take the time to sleep. And so workshop is going to be talking about how you can think further out so you give yourself the time to sleep and the time to study. And the final myth is that finals are everything. A lot of us are under the assumption that finals will make or break your life, your class, your GPA, your college experience. But if you've been doing well the whole semester, your final isn't going to drastically impact your grade, and so you don't need to carry that stress with you. However, if you have been struggling and your final will critically impact your grade, it's just important to remember that there's a lot of other things going on with you, and that this one grade, this one test isn't necessarily going to stop your educational pursuits. And so it's just important to keep that perspective when you are taking a test. So let's keep going. All right. So when it comes to testing, it's important to be informed. You're going to want to know when the test is. Normally, I would suggest you go to the registrar's website and look at the finals testing structure. But I know that since we moved online, a lot of professors have potentially changed their schedules of when they're giving finals because you can do it a lot differently when you don't have to be there physically. So it's just important that you know when your tests are being held, the dates and the times. You're also going to want to know what software will be required. Are you going to have to use Blackboard? Are there specific proctoring softwares that you need to become familiar with that are going to be used on your test, either now or potentially in a future online testing environment? Or your professor might require you to handwrite a lot of things because they don't want you using the computer as a method of preventing cheating. So it's important to kind of know and be prepared and have all those materials ready. You want to know how much time you'll have on the test. Some tests are take home in this online environment. Others, there's going to be a set timer where they send you the test and there's a timer and you have to complete it in that amount of time and submit it online by the time is up. So it's, you want to know that as well. You're going to want to know what kind of questions will be asked. Are they going to be essays, free response, fill in the blank, multiple choice? Usually your professor will tell you at least that much, so then you can kind of be prepared for how to study and what kind of questions to ask yourself when you're testing yourself and getting ready. And then you're going to want to know what will be covered. You can definitely ask your professor that. They will tell you what will be covered in your test. So you don't want to go in completely blind. Just at least know what will be covered on your test. I'm going backwards. There we go. All right, so you're going to want to make a study outline. And so the easiest way to do that is to use your syllabus as a guide. And so that's set up all the different subjects that were covered during the semester. And so you can kind of look at that and see, okay, is this a cumulative test? Is it on a specific subject? And so use that to kind of guide what you're going to study. Think like your instructor. What questions do they like to ask in class during their Zoom sessions? How do they phrase things? Do they ask you to recall specific details? Do they ask you to summarize? Their professors will most likely be testing you in the same way they've been asking you to learn, because that's what the test is essentially checking, how much you've learned. And so think back to what's been on your homework, your tests, your quizzes, and use those kind of questions to help you prepare for your final. And so I wanted to show you this really cool handout that I've been borrowing from Baylor University, and it essentially shows you samples of study plans that you can use as you prepare for your finals and any future test. And so feel free, I'm going to leave this up for a couple seconds to screenshot this and use it in the future. This is also going to be recorded, so then you can go back and look back at the recording to look at this if you don't want to screenshot it right now. So with the 8-day study plan, they started having you go back and look at all your old materials and then build your study guide, starting big, looking at the bigger ideas, then focusing in on the things that you really need to focus on. And by the day before the exam, you're self-quizzing, you're not learning new things, and you're definitely prepping yourself for the test. You're getting everything ready. 5-day study plan is very similar. It's just in a shorter amount of time. And so ideally, you'll give yourself a week, if not 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get ready for your tests. And so you can even spread this out more if you want to. It's never too early to start preparing for your tests and your final exams. And so hopefully this gives you kind of an idea about how you can review your materials, how you can take the tests and the homework you have and review them and use them as tools to get yourself ready for your finals. So once you kind of figure out what you need to study, you're going to want to create a schedule to study it. Now, I know a lot of us are home right now, or wherever you're quarantining, that may be with your family, and maybe by yourself, and maybe with friends. And so you're going to want to find a place that you can study. And I know it's not convenient because you can't be on campus at STSU right now. You can't be at a library or a coffee shop, environments that we traditionally associate with studying and that might be more conducive traditionally to that. And so you're going to have to find a place in your own space to study. And so if that's not an issue of where, it might be an issue of when. So finding a time when you have the least amount of distractions, when either your kids or your parents or your siblings or your friends are going to be least likely to distract you. So that might mean you have to start waking up earlier in the morning or staying up later at night, or if other people are going to be out at lunch, that's when you study. And so you're going to have to figure out what works for you, and ideally do it in a distraction-free environment. With your study schedule, small frequent sessions are better. Again, I kind of mentioned earlier that there's this idea that, oh, I'm going to study today and just do all my studying for this one test. But you're more likely to retain things if you study them in smaller, more frequent sessions. And kind of with that, I encourage you to shoot for consistency. So be consistent with your study sessions. And also, you're more likely to stick with them if they're more like a consistent time of day. And so if that's every day at 3 p.m. for 30 minutes, you're going to study this, you're more likely to stick with it than if it's scattered all over the place. Study like you're testing. And so it's hard to simulate what an in-classroom environment is if you can't study there. The online environment is a unique opportunity to really prepare yourself for your testing environment. And so if you know you're going to be at your desk studying with your fan on and you have music playing, take your test in the similar environment. Or if you know during your test you're going to have it be very quiet and you have to have a web camera on and you can't have distractions, you can't have the internet, study that same way so that when it comes to the time of your test, to the time of your final, it's not a surprise. You're used to working in that kind of an environment and that's not a distraction. And finally, build in a study group. You can use Zoom to create study groups, or the Google Office, or there's Microsoft Office and the Google kind of different platforms. And so find ways that you can virtually study with people and bring them in. Now, I encourage you, the first time you go through material, don't do it with other people. Go through, review your notes, your tests, your homework, figure out what you're good with and what you need to learn. Spend time making sure you've learned things so that by the time you get to your group study, you're not learning something for the first time. It's just review. And then you can kind of see maybe where other people have strengths and you have strengths and you can complement each other. But kind of know what you need to know before you go into a study group. So now I kind of want to show you an example. This is another thing you can screenshot. I'll leave this up here for a second. So this is a great way to build in a study schedule. I like it because it encourages you to block out time for your classes, your meals, your work. I know a lot of you may not be working, but some of you may still be working virtually. So use something like this to make sure you're blocking out enough time to study. Most of your courses are designed with the idea that for every hour you're in class, either in person or through Zoom, you're going to be spending 2 to 3 hours studying or working outside of class. And so if you have a class 3 hours a week for a 3-unit class, you need to be blocking out 6 to 9 hours ideally for studying. So use something like this worksheet to make sure you're giving yourself that necessary study time. You may not need it, but give yourself more and then take away. It's better to do that than to not give yourself enough time to study. All right, that's enough time with this one. All right, so make sure you're managing your health, especially now in this situation with the virus going on and the levels of stress that are happening in our homes and our communities. It's very important that you take care of yourself. Now, I can't even specifically talk to how to deal with your health if you've caught the virus or if a family member or someone you're quarantining with has. And so be sure you're paying attention to what medical experts are saying and encouraging you to do. Now, if that isn't a factor, or if you've already considered that factor, here are some other things to think about. Make sure you're planning regular study breaks. So again, don't block 5 or 6 hours straight of studying. Do half an hour and give yourself a break. Or make sure you're planning out a time to go for a walk. Exercise is going to be important to make the blood flow in your body and get to your brain. And it's just important to keep you sane. And so make sure that you are getting exercise regularly, whether that's indoors or you're social distancing outside and moving around. Do what you got to do. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. I know without the regular kind of environment of classes and work, it's really easy for a lot of us to just sleep whenever, to eat whenever, to do work whenever. But you want to make sure that you're giving your body enough rest that you can focus when you're awake and not have to be a distraction. Be sure you're eating well and hydrating. I know it's real easy now that a lot of us are much closer to the kitchen than we normally are to not eat well and to just snack on a lot of stuff that's not great for our health, and that's fine in moderation. But make sure you're taking care of your body because you don't want that to be a distraction when it comes to your test. Find something that de-stresses you. I know some options are off the table, but if it's music, if it's playing games, if it's reading, if it's meditating, find something that de-stresses you, especially if you're feeling overwhelmed during a study session or a test, and figure out how you can use that to help you refocus and have other things not be a distraction. Also, I just wanted to point out that counseling and psych services are available. You can call, you can log onto their website through SDSU and see what other virtual services they have. I know they're still there to support students, and so make sure you take advantage of that if you need it. They want to be there to support you. They know this is a very stressful time, and students may need to talk to someone to help kind of process everything that's going on. There's a lot of potential trauma or triggering factors when it comes to everything that's happening right now. So make sure you're taking care of your physical health and your mental health as well. And with that, identify your support network. So in addition to counseling and psych services, the Writing Center is still available. Now, while you can't go to campus anymore, you can still set up virtual appointments. If your final is a paper, or you're going to have long answer questions and you want to practice doing those, set up a virtual appointment with the Writing Center. Have someone look over your writing and tell you how you can make it stronger. Our Math Center is still setting up virtual Zoom appointments. So if you're struggling with math and you really want to do well on your final, we've got people ready to help you with your questions or the areas that you feel you're not doing as well in or you're struggling in. Everyone has to take at least a math class as part of being a student at SDSU, and so it's not something you can necessarily avoid forever. So don't just decide that I'm going to fail this math class now and I'm just going to try again later. Put in the time and effort now, get the support you need, and take on your final with pride, knowing that you've put in a lot of hard work and that you've done everything you can to make sure you pass it. Another resource, your advisors are here. I'm here as a student success advisor. We've got your major advisors. We've got the Advising and Evaluation Center. So if you have questions about advising about classes, about things you want to do, make sure you connect with your advisors, because we're all here virtually ready to support you. And then SASE. So for testing, if you need extra support, make sure you're connecting with SASE sooner than later, because it could take some time for them to make sure you're getting the accommodations you need. So do check with them if you know you're going to need testing accommodations, because sometimes we could all use a little help. Totally true. Now, these are from the Learning Scientists. They're a group of psychologists that study how people learn, and they are 6 strategies for effective learning. And I've kind of mentioned some of them throughout this workshop, but I think this is another great resource for you to screenshot, to visit their website, to learn more about what are ways where you can really effectively study. I think when it comes to testing, retrieval practice up there in the top right corner is one of the most effective, where essentially it's putting away all your material and doing a brain dump and practicing pulling out information from your brain, kind of similar to what would be in a testing environment. So if you study similar to how you're going to test, testing then all of a sudden isn't so scary. I mentioned the interleaving, which is switching between different subjects. And so what that does is it constantly forces you to put information in your short-term memory and pull information from your short-term memory, which means that it has a better chance of moving to your long-term memory. And so that's an effective way to really learn new information. And so you can kind of look at all of these and see what you might like the best, what might best work for you, because not everyone's gonna you kind of feel a synergy with every learning strategy out there, but there's at least one or two of these that could definitely work for you. So here are some more study strategies. I like the 1 hour intense study session strategy because it basically sets a goal for every study session you have. So you take 5 minutes of your 1 hour study session and you plan out what you're going to study. You look ahead, you kind of review the chapter and see, okay, this is what I'm going to be reviewing. And then you spend 35 to 40 minutes going over the material. Now, this could be your first time reading it, and it could all be very new information, or this could be a review session, and you could just be going over information you've already read before, working to retain the information better. And then once you've done that and you've said, okay, this is everything I'm just going to review for this session, then you take 5 to 10 minutes to re-review and make sure you understand everything you just went over. And see if you have questions and say, okay, I got all this, but there's that one thing that I didn't quite understand, or there's something that I want to follow up with my professor, or I want to ask a question, or I want to Google. And that's where you can then focus your efforts on your next study session or further study experiences if you want to, send an email about something or do research. That's what you can then spend your future time on. And once you're done with that, take a 10-minute break. And that gives you the time to step away, refocus, go to the bathroom, eat a snack, do a couple jumping jacks if you need to get moving. And with that, you can do those 1 hour study sessions then back to back because you've given yourself that built-in break in the middle there. So that's just an idea. It may not work for you. You might want to shorten it. You might want to lengthen it. But 1 hour is kind of an easy block to schedule. So that's something to think about. I also encourage to practice recalling information. That retrieval practice is one of those effective learning strategies, but you can do it in multiple ways. You can do something auditorily, so you can say it out loud. You can do it tactilely, so you can write things down and practice doing a brain dump on paper, or you can do visual practice, so you can practice recalling graphs or charts or processes. And so if you think that might be something you are going to be tested on, that could be something that you're going to want to make sure you practice studying. And potentially in a virtual environment, you could have your professors as part of a test say, I want you to draw this graph, or I want you to draw this chart or this process. And so it's going to be important that you have practiced producing those kind of graphs on your own so that it's not a surprise when it comes to the test. Another strategy is to use practice exams or create your own. So put yourself through a fake test so that you're ready for the real test and you're not surprised when it actually comes to the test. Yeah, I think that one kind of speaks for itself. The more times you put yourself through that testing environment, the more prepared you're going to be for the actual test. All right, so we've talked about kind of the lead up to your final, how you can study, how you can prepare yourself. Now let's talk about the day of your final. Now, a lot of us do deal with anxiety, and it's particularly when it comes to testing. Now, we want to perform well and demonstrate all the work that we've put in. And so here are some ways where you can kind of address that test anxiety. Remind yourself of your past successes. It can be very easy to suddenly doubt ourselves and all the work we've been doing. And so I think it's important that you remind yourself of all the hard work that you've put in and how far you've come. Do accept some of that anxiety. Sometimes that can be a motivator. It can prevent you from becoming too lax. It can keep you engaged. And so a little bit of anxiety can be helpful, but you don't want to push it too far. And so you want to make sure you're getting enough sleep and you're not overdoing it on the coffee. Coffee can definitely push you over the edge when it comes to anxiety, because it can too much caffeine can simulate the feelings of anxiety. So you want to be careful with that. You want to make sure you're moving around and you're not getting too stiff. Now, one of the beauties of the virtual environment, especially if you don't have to take your test with a camera on, is that you can move around much more than you can in a classroom environment. So think about that as a potential opportunity to take advantage of, whether that's getting up and doing some jumping jacks or just kind of pacing. Something, if that helps you get the blood flowing and get your mind thinking, then that could be definitely something to do to help with test anxiety. Try slow breathing. Just take a deep breath in, hold it, take a deep breath out. Do that a couple times and see if that can help just calm your nerves. And the final one I think is really important, is just to expect curveballs. If you know something is going to be on the test to try to trip you up, no matter what the test is, then it's not a surprise when you see it. You may not be fully prepared for what it is, but you know it's going to be there. And so that isn't so scary because you're expecting it to be there. Again, I'm not a licensed psychologist. I'm not a counselor. I'm just one of your academic advisors. And so if you do feel like you want to talk to someone about test anxiety or other related concerns, please do reach out to Counseling and Psych Services, and we have people who are more than happy to work with you on that. You got this. So here are some test taking strategies, and I tried to set this to tailor it towards the idea of taking online classes and online finals. So you're going to want to make sure you block out distractions. What immediately jumps to my mind is your quarantine pals, the people you are stuck in your house or your home with. So you're going to want to make sure that they know when and where you're going to be taking your final, and that they give you the space and the sound levels you need to be effective on your test. You don't want them to be a distraction. And if you just let them know, hey, I've got this test at this time, I need y'all to be quiet for this hour or these 2 hours, or I need this room to myself. Just let people know sooner than later. But yeah, when you get your test, make sure you scan the whole thing. Know what's going to happen so that you can kind of plan out how much time you're going to spend on each thing, so that you don't spend all 2 hours on the multiple choice section only to realize you had to write a short essay and you've run out of time with that. So make sure you look at the whole essay or the whole exam before starting. Do a brain dump on scratch paper. Do that retrieval practice. If you've been practicing it, then you should be good at it when it comes to the test. So put everything on paper that you think you might forget. All the important things that you're like, I need to know this for this test, put it on a piece of scratch paper so that you have it as a reference, and it doesn't need to sit in your short-term memory all the time, and then that's just something you can constantly refer back to. So any important notes that you need to put down for yourself for this exam, do it on in a brain dump on some scratch paper. Make sure you read the instructions for your exam. It's very, very important because you don't want to miss something or run out of time or have misunderstood anything or the expectations of your professor. And so just definitely read and reread the instructions of your test. Make sure you're tracking your time and set your alarms. If you need to have your phone out, you can actually do that in this online environment. Make sure you set an alarm maybe 10, 15 minutes before the end of the exam to make sure that you give yourself enough time to look over the exam. And that's definitely something you're going to want to do. So make sure you're checking your answers before you submit. Check them 2 or 3 times. It can be very easy to accidentally insert a typo if you have to type something out, or delete something accidentally, or potentially if you're scrolling through, you might have skipped over a multiple choice question without realizing it because you don't have the physical test in front of you. So just make sure that you're giving yourself enough time at the end to go over everything and check and recheck all your answers. One of the easier things I think you can do is answer the easier questions first. And so if you've gone through the whole exam and you've looked over it, answer the things that you know you can get done right away. Don't waste your time on those or leave those for the end, because those are potentially easy points you miss out. If you spend all your time initially on the hard stuff and you don't leave yourself enough time to answer the easy stuff, that's a missed opportunity. So do that first. And then finally, when you've submitted your exam, uh, make sure you treat yourself afterwards. Reward yourself for the work you've done. Remind yourself of all the hard work you've put in and celebrate that. You've done a lot. Make sure you're recognizing all the hard work you've put in.